I'm Ray Myers with All Hands AI, and today on the channel we're talking with Bethany Crystal. Bethany, would you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Bethany Crystal. I am the founder and CEO of a new AI-powered learning app called MuseKat.
Yeah, so what is MuseCat?
It's a great question. MuseKat is an AI mobile-first audio learning journey for parents to enjoy museums with their kids. So by scanning the exhibit with your phone and scanning the description label at a museum, you can translate that content into any age-appropriate context. And because I'm targeting kids, the narrations are from the voice of a friendly little meerkat named Miko.
So we talked about this briefly when we met in New York, and you were telling me that this is your first software project as a builder, but
Yes,
far
it
from
is.
your first software project overall. So how
Yeah.
did that come to be about?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in the tech industry for 15 years. I started my career at a small boutique startup in Philadelphia area, and then spent 4 years early at Stack Overflow on various sales, marketing, operations, and business roles, where I was really exposed to a lot of things happening on the engineering side, but never on the engineering or product team myself. I then spent 5 years working at Union Square Ventures, where I got to see a lot of companies start from the earliest stages, and again was exposed to a lot of technical founders and technical co-founders, but always sort of feeling like I'm not part of that ilk because I'm not an engineer myself. And it really wasn't until I went fractional and started doing a lot more experimentation, both in the crypto Web3 ecosystem and then most recently, the last year in AI, that I started to recognize with the power of natural language, I can also build for the first time. And after spending 6 months training up other people on AI fundamentals, I finally hit this breaking point in like December or January where I said, it's time for me to like get my developer environment set up and see what I can build. And that's the first thing that came out.
Yeah, I remember now you were at Stack Overflow,
Hmm.
and our mutual friend Anna Hevesi introduced us. And I actually like immediately I just want to ask you about Stack Overflow for the
Of
full
course. Yeah,
overview,
yeah.
but I won't. But my interview with Anna, I'll link in the description here. And we did talk about Stack Overflow for most of that time. It was a really unique thing. But something you said there about not being kind of part of the developer, um, you know, community there, even though you were, working on it in many ways, and maybe that's been true of most of the rest of your career.
Hmm.
What's that like, and what other kind of roles were you in?
I was one of the first 10 people on the sales team at Stack Overflow. I was the second hire on the marketing team. And then, like every classic startup, my role changed basically every 6 months for the 4 years that I was there. So I did product marketing, customer support marketing. I helped the sales team on strategic selling and did a lot of content and events and things like that. And spent a lot of time understanding the profile of the developers that we worked with, but also I was working with the hiring platform for Stack Overflow. So I also spent time talking to hiring managers, engineers, CEOs, and HR leaders about what they look for in strong engineers. So I had a very intimate understanding of the profile of an engineer and how to talk about technical things, but wasn't the one actually doing that work.
And more recently, I understand you've been in, for instance, project manager roles.
Yeah,
Is that
that's
true?
right. Yeah, about 1 year ago, actually, I was the interim general manager for the IPFS and libp2p developer shop, which got spun out of Protocol Labs under a new name called Interplanetary Shipyard. And that was the first time I was the only non-technical hire with a group of people, and really a rewarding and fascinating experience.
Um, Now, IPFS, for those who don't know, is Interplanetary File System,
Yeah, very
which
ambitious name.
is just a fascinating technology. It is it is a distributed file store, and tell me more about that, though.
What my role was there, or just like kind of how
No,
it
no,
works.
like if someone is listening and like they have just discovered that there is an interplanetary file store, like why does that exist?
Yeah, I mean, Protocol Labs has been around for over a decade now, I think. And IPFS was really one of the first tenets of this idea that it's actually better long term to have content addressed by the guts of what it is as opposed to where it happens to be right now. So, a problem that you see on the early stages of the internet, if you put a blog post up and someone takes it down, you get the 404 error when you go there because you can't find it. But with IPFS, that's never the case because you're indexing based on the content itself. And that's a really powerful framework. And the idea that you can have content be addressed in a distributed way that releases you from the responsibility of centralized servers is also a really powerful framework. And actually, one that I think is becoming more and more important in this local first era of internet because it means when everyone is building software, I might not want to be sending every little piece of my intimate pieces of information all the way back up to these centralized cloud servers. And if I can have things that are more locally hosted, both IPFS and their networking library, libp2p, make that really possible. So when I joined, I had been spending a lot of time working in the crypto and Web3 ecosystem with blockchain builders and did a lot of early foundational work around how does a dev shop that's been primarily open source start to think about how they could, turn some of this into like a fundable business model to help these people keep their jobs for the long term.
That's fascinating. And you clearly have been in the weeds for a long time, but then you decided to build something yourself.
Hmm.
Um, that was kind of a pivot, both in the kind of subject matter and the role, right?
Yeah.
So it was AI tools coming in that made you feel like you could get started doing that. Is that what you said?
I've been working around education, workforce, and learning for my entire career. And when I was working almost exclusively in Web3, I really wanted to help make Web3 be the new framework to teach in schools and spent a lot of time trying to be a bridge between organizations like the Ethereum Foundation or the Solana Foundation and like schools and ecosystems on the industry side. But crypto just like wasn't ready for that level of deep embedding within an academic system. And while that was happening, I was working with IPFS crew still and seeing this generalized movement of AI. And working with the shipyard team was also a really interesting moment for me because it's the first time in my life I became 100% dependent on ChatGPT in order to do my job. And I set up at the beginning these custom GPTs to help me in the role of GM. So I created like a CFO GPT, a CEO coach GPT, like a CTO GPT. And whenever I was like stuck on these questions that I didn't answer, I would just use them and they would sort of grow in intelligence with me. And that's actually how I was able to hold my own in a job that was pretty uncomfortable for me. And when I realized how quickly AI could accelerate learning, it sort of became an addiction. And I also recognized, wow, if I can manage to run something like an organization in an area where I'm not a domain expert, maybe it's time for me to go back into an area where I do feel more like a domain expert and see if AI can be that sort of bridge area. So I spent 6 months helping a nonprofit called Tech NYC start another nonprofit that was training education and workforce nonprofits in AI. And one of my favorite ways to learn something very quickly is to sign up to teach a class about it to someone else before you even learn it yourself. So this past fall, I was just trying to keep up like 1 or 2 weeks ahead and then teach back the things that I learned. And that was a really exhilarating experience. And by the end of that, I had gotten enough confidence in AI and sort of built up the muscle and the habit of learning that quickly that I was able to sort of start to deploy my own little micro apps and things. And that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. Yeah, with this app MuseKat.
Yeah.
So, um, what are the tools that have been the most useful for you in that? And I'm aware that you're not yet an open hands user, and that's just
Mm-mm.
fine. But what
Not
what are
yet,
what
but
are some of the
you
tools?
can convince me
Yeah.
on this call. I'm always open to exploring and learning new tools. Um, the initial prototype I built in a weekend. I used ChatGPT and I had one long context window with the problem statement that I wanted to solve, which was I'm a mom, I go to museums with my kids. I want to make the learning at museums more accessible and kid appropriate by creating an app that takes the pictures from the museum, runs it through AI for an age appropriate context, and then adds an audio layer for my kids. And it told me how it would take me about 3 months to roll this out. And I said, let's do it in 3 hours. So I just like really pushed it to get that MVP stage. And um, I sat on my laptop in my living room, just sort of going through step by step. And I spent a lot of time, an unrealistic and sad amount of time, just getting that initial developer environment set up on Cursor um, to start to like push that through. Got the API keys that I needed, started to build that out. And then luckily, my husband was also home that night, and he helped me get it up hosted on his own like personal server through AWS, and we were able to bring the app like on our website on our phones to the Metropolitan Museum of Art the next day, where we used it with our kids successfully. And that was just like honestly the first time in my life I'd built something on the internet, deployed it, and then used it with people all in like a 24-hour period. And it was a real paradigm shift for me, honestly. It was pretty amazing.
Especially getting to see your users. I mean, I know a lot of experienced software developers that don't directly get to interact with the users of their stuff, and
Yeah.
that's for a while why I was so interested in working on internal apps. Is because you're at least, even if you're not talking with the users, the customers of the company, if your customers are within the company, usually you have some kind of relationship with them, the problems they need you to solve. And but you got to have not only that, but yeah, this sort of burst of creative flow.
Yeah, it was
Um,
it was crazy. And then like a week later, I went back to the museum and I started putting headphones on other kids and I got to see other people react to it in real time, which was also like honestly like a crazy out of body moment because the parents were like, "Oh, what is this app? I've never heard of it." And it was the first time I just said, "I built it." And it was like, "What?" Um, since then, I wanted to make sure I knew how to update the app and make new features. So I'm no longer really using ChatGPT to keep it up. I'm definitely much more robust in Cursor right now. And I also pay for Devin AI. That's been really fun for me to explore. And I use Claude as well to help me conceptualize things like wireframes. I am moving the thing onto mobile now. And I still use ChatGPT as a translator layer to help me take an idea that I have, frame it in a context that's more developer centric, and then feed that context to either Cursor or Devin.
so this is fascinating to me, this workflow, because
Yeah.
you've cobbled together so many different AI assistants that you're
Yeah.
using kind of to make up for the deficiencies in the other ones, or
Yeah.
to run ideas or whatever. Because like that was like four different tools you just mentioned that you're going in between.
Yeah. It is wholly inelegant. I call it like collage coding or cowgirl
Yeah.
coding. It is not pretty, but it sort of gets the job done.
So surely, open hands will just, be number five. Why not? Why not have? But what are some examples of things that walls you run into that make you need to go from one AI tool to another? Like in the ecosystem, these are things that are really helpful for us to understand because I think a lot of users are needing to do that.
I've learned a lot. I would do a lot differently for my next app, but I've already come this far. One thing that I didn't know earlier on, because I'd never even used Cursor before I built this app, is every time I push a new feature, I just like wasn't really looking at how it was deploying that feature, and often it was going through database migrations, creating new like Python files in places that we didn't really need them, or just like sort of bulking up the load. So, for instance, the prompt, even about how Miko the Meerkat answers questions for you about what you see in the museum, it was calling like 3 or 4 different places in the code. So, it was really hard for me to know where to go and make edits to change the output there because I didn't really have control over that. The other problem was every time we ran a database migration, it would completely break the app, knock it down. And it's because Cursor did not have, and probably still doesn't have, enough context to understand the entirety of the system. So it was just like not really set up super well. And at one point, when I did try to give Cursor more context by saying summarize my entire instance so that I could train another AI, I accidentally included the .n file in there, and they're like, "No, you can't share your API keys with us." And I had to like go and like rechange everything and rewire it, which really opens up like a lot of questions for me about like what are the foundational architectural elements of building a robust app that could scale with users that I just don't know? What are the must know security features that me as a beginner dev must know? I posted about this earlier on on my blog earlier this week, but there is a developer on Twitter, this guy Leo, who built an app on Cursor as a SaaS app, talked about it, and then had a bunch of people hack into his own app because it turns out he had inadvertently shared his API keys. And it kind of became this like sad moment of the internet where a lot of people were attacking him and kind of mocking him on Twitter. It was just sort of like a rough moment. Things like that from a new perspective, like what do I not know that I don't know? And that's where I think like real senior engineers and foundational knowledge can help a lot.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, like, I'm hearing that there are decisions that aren't really being covered well, even if a lot of the rote work is able to be streamlined. And this is where, someone who is using it to do things that they mostly already kind of understand the domain of, they're not going to be held back so much by that. Like, I'm not worried about it committing my API key because I'm not going to let it. But you're lucky that something stopped you from committing your API key because that is a classic problem, right? Like, and
Right.
a million other decisions.
And for me, that's not good enough. It's not good enough because this app is for parents and their kids. So I know if I want this to go in the App Store, and I am going to put this in the App Store, I need the privacy to be locked down. I need like COPPA restrictions. I need like really good data, like account deletion frameworks. I need a very clear understanding of like what information I'm collecting, where it's going, and why. And all of that is just really hard to get in this no code builder world.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought up that tweet by the Leo fellow, which we're sort of assuming is a real situation. I'm not sure, but he'd been sharing the stuff before
Mm,
that, so I'm guessing people are aware of it. Um, and whether or not it's a face value, it seems to be something that is playing out a lot. And the reactions, especially you mentioned, I mean, people are kind of like it's like they're dancing on their grave, like these kind of emotional backlashes that software engineers are having after sort of being told like we're now irrelevant because people can now just get on one of these things.
mm,
And and what have we been saying, like, okay, well, call us when it all comes crashing down. And then, so in the backdrop of all that, I see someone saying, oh, I used the AI assistant to code and I don't actually know what I'm doing. And my thing came crashing down. And everyone's like rather cruelly laughing. But, that's the whole arc that
yeah.
it's fit into, right? Like what are your thoughts on that? You're kind of watching it, from the other side of the fence.
I am watching it from the other side of the fence. I replied to him on Twitter and said, like, thanks for sharing this. This could have been me. And frankly, I shared one example of how it could have been me, but another one is like, and I put this in my blog post when I was summarizing that story, is I worked at a company several years ago that got very nervous about security and unbeknownst to me hired like a private cybersecurity firm to try and hack in to the back end, and I was the target of this attack. And I was on vacation with my husband, got an email while I was on vacation to do an interview to talk about how kids in high school and college could get jobs in tech. And just like that's like a really good way to social engineer me. And I'm like, of course I have to take this interview. And my husband was driving to the rental property in the rental car, and I'm on my laptop, and I downloaded some browser extension and did like a 35-minute interview with this U.S. news reporter. And that browser extension ended up being malicious spyware that gave access to my entire Google suite. And I didn't know until I got back to work on Monday, and they were like, "Yeah, that was us. That was also not a real interview. It was like a double scam." But very, very embarrassing. So unless you get like a moment like that to really mess up, it's or you actually have training. It's like really hard to know what those like lookouts are. And I would personally love to see like ilk of developers, like the new white hat developer, the white hat developer of the AI era, could be someone who's helping people like me, like bring up and up level the ecosystem. Because one of the things that I think is really, really interesting about no code building is that it's opening up the white space of what the software could be for people like me who've never built before. And if you consider a whole new persona of builders, that could mean a whole different type of software. So, and it may be more inclusive, maybe more culturally relevant, maybe more like niche, maybe like reaching audiences that haven't been reached before because we've needed these like software engineering degrees in order to do that work. So I think there's like a real opportunity for folks to come in and establish like a training arm or some like way of empowering that no code builder audience. But I do understand some of it is going to be mocking as well.
Well, it's unfortunate because developers mock non-developers too much as it is. This is not serving the cause, but it's also in a context in which, like the forces have been feeding us a lot of career insecurity
Hmm.
about this. And realistically, like there is career volatility in this business. The programming languages I've been using, the tools have been coming and going sort of throughout my career. We're kind of needing to adapt regardless, but
Yeah,
we've been fed a lot of narratives about relevance that like finding a convenient target. Sometimes people are finding a convenient target for their kind of resentment at being told this, and it's unfortunate, right? Like what we're trying to do is build the future of software.
yeah,
And there's some different ideas I've tried to get into, like the different scenarios I see people pitching. But at the end of the day, we're like, they're just trying to make something work and make it better than it was. Um, and these kind of factions of where how they see AI playing out have really, it's been kind of at each other's throats.
hmm yeah. I listened to your other podcast about the six sort of possible futures there. And I think you asked me which one I think I resonate mostly with, and I think it's probably somewhere between what you refer to as the devocalypse. How do you say that?
Yeah, like apocalypse of
Apocalypse.
developers, the devocalypse. Yeah,
The devocalypse, okay, or the innovator's
yeah.
paradise. So the developer apocalypse slash the innovator's paradise, but I think we're in between that and your other possibility, which is uncharted waters, because I think there's just so much that we don't know yet. So I do believe that there is this innovator's paradise, which is what I'm experiencing, but we don't know what information or skills I will need to sort of succeed in that world or anyone. But one other thing to come back to what you were just talking about around what engineers can be doing with like this advent of AI, like I've been spending so much of my time using AI to learn how to be an engineer. And a question I have is how much are engineers using AI to learn about how to do other roles in business? Because I'd like to see that also start to happen. And then rather than just build software in these silos, it actually opens up everyone to the world's knowledge about business building and like creating these sort of in between translator layers could be really, really interesting.
I certainly have used, chat tools like ChatGPT and Claude to dip into some domain, or oftentimes I might be trying to just brainstorm like a name for something, or a pitch, or whatever. Or I'm trying to navigate the literature on something where I don't even know what to Google yet, and it'll help me get to
Yeah,
what do I need to go and read even. But I think for people to expand their sites like that, there has to be a will.
yeah,
And maybe AI is going to help you with that, or maybe you need to just connect with someone who is in that area. We need to like just direct cross pollination like we're doing,
hmm,
but there has to be the will. And a lot of developers, like the stereotype is not unfair sometimes, where we can get very insular and we're given a lot of dignity and respect by being hyper specialized. And sometimes developers even think of themselves as just only talking to the machine, not even talking to
yeah,
people. That's not the reality of the job at all, I think, but that is sometimes how we think. And so, let alone other fields, we barely want to talk to the next development team down the hall sometimes, so I think that's something that needs to change.
hmm,
And I think a changing landscape, is going to confer like increasing benefit to people who are willing to do that.
yeah,
We talked about the Devocalypse versus the Innovator's Paradise, and
hmm,
like the good version of that is where you're able to just keep talking to the thing about what the app needs to be next, and it doesn't have this like architectural meltdown you mentioned
Right.
where it starts just making a mess, or it starts not understanding its own database migrations that it made last week, or like it just decides the app is in a completely different thing than it was before. Um, so I think people are very divided as to whether there is going to be like agents in the future that just get over that. Like if they're able
Yeah.
to make contextually good decisions over time.
I know people on both sides of the spectrum. And so I don't know. I will say from where I sit today, it's not ready for me to do that on my own. So the thing I've been doing and trying, I mean, in the like 2 months that I've been building, so take it with a grain of salt. I've been building prototypes myself and piloting those use cases with real users using Cursor and Devin and Claude and ChatGPT and all of my tools. And then once I get the app to a place where I feel like, oh, this feels like I need to solidify it, I think that's the moment when I will get a real engineer to help me. So like right now, the version of MuseKat.com that lives on my website, it works. You can pull it up on your phone on a browser and it will do the thing it says it will do most of the time, unless I break it. But it's not good enough for the App Store. So this is a moment where I'm like, okay, I need a contractor who can come in and sit with me for a month. And basically, we need to rebuild this thing. But what was really great about this experience, which I'm wrapping up in about a week, is I was able to explain myself through code to someone who speaks in code. Because if I had just hired an engineer and said, I want to build this museum app, we would not have landed in the place that we landed. And it's only because I was able to get as much of my creative thoughts expressed on a website that I'm able to translate it in a much more meaningful way. And that's a really powerful thing. So, now I'm going to sort of see what happens when I have a mobile app because the offboarding for this, at least first engagement, is not just like help me get it in the App Store, but teach me literally what every single text file does and show me how to push a change here, make a database migration, launch a thing, test it locally, push it to prod. Like, let's get the whole app end to end because I need to be able to keep pushing micro features on the new version until maybe I hit another point where I need to bring in someone else again who's an expert. So that's going to be my sort of modular approach for now.
Yeah, it's kind of this outside in learning path.
Yeah.
You've been on like yeah, it's very unintuitive to me.
It is very
We
unintuitive.
learn
I
kind of
know.
inside out where we're spending a lot
Yeah.
of time where there may be just a part of your stack that we would have understood enough to do, but we were doing it all ourselves. You're starting with a lot of this experience in the domain of software development outside of the actual code side. Now you're getting greater and greater exposure
Mm-hmm.
to getting something else to help you build something with it, and then you're going to have to be able to maintain it yourself. It's a very counterintuitive
Yeah,
learning
it's
path, but you do get there. And like I think what makes learning is being inspired. Like you've got the
yeah.
project that you're inspired by, and you're able to do it on that.
Yeah, the counterintuitive learning path is true. Recently, I was thinking about, okay, how do I choose the next feature that I want to test on MuseKat? And a traditional developer environment would be constrained by the limits of the capacity of their engineering team. So I was like, okay, I'm going to pick like one or two features. I'm going to like push them live. And then I realized I've got this AI agent that can push 5 features at once. So rather than wait and see for each one, I pushed like 5 simultaneous ideas over a single weekend, just cloning a version of my app on the landing page with like different models of it. And it's sort of like the new way to A B test something. I was able to like run them all by real humans the following week. And then I picked the one that I'm like, okay, this one seems to be the most interesting. Let's keep focusing on that one. So that's also a very counterintuitive way to build, which is build first, test second. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, traditionally, I have seen people hire a contractor to build some initial prototype based on, like these ideas they've hatched up, and they're doing it technically the right way as far as they can tell. But then they get it and they spend all this budget and time doing that if it wasn't, developed in a very iterative way, it's often contracting is not. they have this completed project, and only once they started poking at it did they realize, like, actually, this needs to be something differently. So there is a tech debt concern, honestly, with this heavy cogen approach,
Oh yeah.
as you've discovered. But the the power of even understanding what you need to be building, like you know, validated idea before you're going to be spending more budget building it out. Like, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Cool. I mean, I have no idea. I'm definitely I think one value that I have, which I'm recognizing, is I have no company. I mean, I have like my one person company, right? But I have no like company. I have no legacy data. I have no brand. I have no one else's money. And I have nothing, right? So I have like everything to gain and nothing to lose, which means unlike a robust established company that if they push their thing live and it breaks their website, someone is getting fired. I can push something live and break my website 3 times a day, and like no one really cares, which means I'm in this place where I can experiment and do weirder things with no permission. And that's actually the place what we all sort of need to be in this build experimental moment right now. And that's why I think we're going to start to see some more crazy changes happening from much smaller teams, is because I don't need other humans to get aligned with my weirdo flows of how I'm building. All I need is like myself and my AIs to be on board, and we can just like try a bunch of stuff.
What else comes to mind about what you would like to see change in the AI coding ecosystem? And you know, we'll wrap up pretty soon here.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have a big pet peeve right now, which is I'm not seeing enough diverse builders trying to build right now. And I find that really disappointing because, as someone, again, who has felt, whether it's been real or not, I have felt excluded from this world as a non-founder, non-engineer for 15 years. And I finally am seeing this moment and seizing this moment as a time for me to step up and join the game. I'm surprised that I'm not seeing droves of other people who have also been in this ecosystem for 15 years in non-technical roles start this. And particularly because for the first time, this opens up the landscape and it really lowers the floor so much that I'm expecting to see more women, and I'm just not right now. Or maybe I'm not looking in the right places, or maybe they're not building the things that I'm looking at building. But I've been surprised at the events I've been attending at still how relatively homogenous the demographic looks. And I would actively like to try and change that.
Where could people get in touch with you, or learn more about your work?
I run a prolific blog at hardmodefirst.xyz, which you can check out. And then you can also try out my app, MuseKat, MuseKat.com. Please don't try to break it. You probably will succeed. So yeah,
If you
that's
break
me.
it, it better be by accident. I'm
If you break it,
watching
you
you.
buy it.
I'm watching you all. Thank you so much for joining us. As it says in the Tao Te Ching, with patience, the most tangled cord may be undone. Thank you.